To understand why Jesus of Nazareth was the Christ, the Jewish Messiah, we have to start where St. Matthew starts, with Jesus' ancestor, the first patriarch and father of all Jews, Abraham. Abraham had faith in God, and through that faith, God declared not just that he would protect and care for Abraham's descendants, but that through them all the nations of the earth will find blessing, because you obeyed my command. Therefore, from the very beginning, it was God's express intention to extend the blessings given to the Jewish people outward to all mankind, a promise that would come to be inextricably linked to the promise of a Messiah who would lead the nation of Israel into a new golden age. These messianic promises are found in the writings of the prophets, men like Jeremiah, Micah, and Isaiah, who gave hope to the Jews when they were conquered by more powerful political forces like the Persians, the Hellenes, or the Romans. Yet how can we know that what these men wrote is indeed true prophecy, and not the mere expression of the collective hopes of the Jews? In answer, we can turn to the great Dominican priest, Reginald Garrigou Lagrange, who points to how all of the prophets taught that the monotheistic God of the Jews was prophesied to extend his moral law to the Gentiles in a new messianic kingdom, which has come to pass in the destruction of the old pagan cults and the triumph of the God of Abraham. The fulfillment of these claims must be of divine origin, for only God can truly order the events of history, and have foreknowledge of their exact means of coming about, particularly when the most recent of these prophecies was made 300 years before Jesus ever lived. And neither can these messianic prophecies be merely Jewish wish fulfillment, since, as Lagrange says, a Messiah who extended the blessings of Judaism as a special people outward equally to Israel's enemies was actually contrary to their hope and expectation as the unique people of God. But what do the prophets actually say about the Messiah, and the particulars of his coming and ministry? Firstly, they tell us that the Messiah will be from the kingly tribe of Judah, and as the prophet Micah tells us, the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, the place where the greatest Israelite king, David, was born. Isaiah tells us that this birth will be accompanied by a sign from God, that the Christ will be born from a virgin, which took place when Mary became pregnant with Jesus. When Christ was born, the gifts of the three kings from far-off lands act as fulfillment of Psalm 72:10, and to echo the words of the book of Numbers, as a star showed the coming of the Messiah. After Herod discovered the news of the new king of the Jews, Mary and Joseph fled to Egypt, which Matthew connects to Hosea 11:1, which says, "Out of Egypt I called my son." As Jesus grew up, but before he began his ministry, his cousin John the Baptist began preaching that the Messiah was coming, to fulfill the prophecy that a messenger will herald the Christ, and that a voice will be heard crying out in the wilderness, "Prepare the way of the Lord." Once Jesus began his ministry, he fulfilled another prophecy by beginning that ministry in the region of Galilee. As he taught, Jesus used parables to explain his meaning and to testify to who he is. Jesus worked many miraculous signs and wonders, for when the Messiah comes, the eyes of the blind shall see, the ears of the deaf shall be opened, the lame shall leap, and the mute shall sing for joy. Though Jesus clearly showed by his conduct his messianic dignity, he also took care to make explicit who he was and what he was here to do. Jesus made direct references to the prophets by repeatedly attributing to himself the title Son of Man, who is the everlasting King prophesied in Daniel chapter 7. Jesus also reads the scroll of Isaiah, which says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me," and tells the assembly that this passage is fulfilled in him. And during Jesus' ministry, though he certainly gets into heated debates with the Pharisees and keepers of the law, Jesus conducted himself in a gentle and sober manner, serving as a model of imitation according to the words of Isaiah 42. Even Jesus' interaction with his followers has prophetic undertones, such as when he gives the keys of the kingdom to Pitre, making him a sort of prime minister of his new church, like Eliakim was given the keys in the Davidic kingdom, and in observance of the prophecy found in Isaiah 22. As Jesus approached the end of his 3-year earthly ministry, he triumphantly entered Jerusalem on a donkey, according to Zechariah's promise about the Jewish king. Though Jesus' apostles struggled to understand how victory could come through suffering, the persecution and rejection of Jesus is another necessary component of his work, and was alluded to via verses like Psalm 117, Psalm 34, Psalm 68, Isaiah 50, and Isaiah 53, with Isaiah 53 in particular pointing to this suffering being for the justification for God's people, and Zechariah 13:1 saying that the Messiah will bring forgiveness of sins. The manner of this suffering was also foretold in great detail, such as being betrayed by one of his followers with whom he shared bread for 30 pieces of silver, the scattering of his apostles, his silence before the Sanhedrin, the beatings Jesus received, that he would be stripped, and that he would be ridiculed for his reliance on God. In addition to these direct messianic fulfillments, another important way of reading the coming of the Messiah is through typology, and how the work of Jesus echoes that of Moses. The book of Deuteronomy features Moses stating that God will raise up another prophet like him, and the rabbinic tradition held that the Messiah would be a great second Moses. The expectation then is that the Messiah would echo Moses by bringing a new and better covenant and a new and better manna, like the heavenly manna that Israel ate in the desert, which Jesus does not merely by bringing miraculous earthly bread, but by bringing his very blood, the flesh of God himself. Jesus directly alludes to this in John 6, when the people contrast him with Moses and ask if Jesus is greater, to which he replies, "I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate the manna in the desert, but they died. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world." It could not be clearer then that Jesus is bringing a new and better reality than what Moses brought. Jesus also came to bring a new covenant and a new priesthood, according to the words of Jeremiah 31 and Isaiah 66, which explicitly says that the Gentiles will be part of this new sacerdotal ministry, once performed by the Levites. Jesus constitutes himself as the new Passover lamb who takes away sins via his death, with his priests representing Jesus himself as their new and better offering to God. The single most impressive sign of Jesus' divinity, of course, is his resurrection from the dead. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor let your devout ones see the pit. Jesus' resurrection is the end of the drama of Holy Week, but only the beginning of the Messianic age. After appearing to hundreds of witnesses and spending 40 days on earth with his disciples, Jesus ascended into heaven to assume his place at the right hand of the Father, to echo Psalm 110. From heaven, God the Holy Spirit was sent to enable the apostles to perform Christ's work, including a spirit of prophecy, which enabled them to preach the gospel in many languages at once, to fulfill the words of the book of Joel. And in this new kingdom, this church established by Christ, the Gentiles were grafted onto Christ and became sharers in the divine promise of salvation, as prophesied by Isaiah 60. For further reading on these topics, please check out Lagrange's On Divine Revelation, Volume 2, as translated by Matthew Minard, as well as Jesus and the Jewish Roots of the Eucharist by Pitre. Thanks for watching.